Hello, everyone. It's Try here. It is the launch of my podcast, and just wanted to introduce myself and sort of why I'm starting a podcast. Uh, I now keep in mind this isn't my main job. This isn't my main revenue source. This is something that I want to put out there, whether it's breaking with what has gone on recently in the Olympics or investing. Some of the questions or some common questions that I get as far as what I do and my investment philosophy and things of that nature. So it's an opportunity for me to point you to resources that I've been able to utilize, whether it's current or past books to read that have helped me along the way. I have nieces and nephews now as well. This is for younger people too, older people, people my age who want to learn a little bit more of what I do and why I do it, how I do it. But this first podcast will be mainly to address a couple topics in terms of, like I said, the breaking recently and investing, current events as far as business. Just for some background, I spent 5 years in formal money management, almost 5 years, and then another few years as a retail sales leader in a leadership development program for a very large bank. I did start an investment firm and was fortunate to have people who wanted to invest with me. And that's been going for a year now, a little over a year now, and it's going pretty well. The philosophy in my investment firm is a value investment philosophy that Warren Buffett has found a lot of success in, and Benjamin Graham, who was his teacher, found a lot of success in as well. And so obviously it's evolved over the years, but there's so many principles that I use in The Intelligent Investor. I recommend everybody get that book and read it. There's so many concepts in that book that I still use today and I find very helpful and relevant today. There's obviously been a lot of updated texts as well, but the principles still are very relevant in my view today. Obviously, certain things such as price to book and things of that nature for asset-light companies may be less important, but valuation measures like price to earnings ratios, owner earnings, right? The hard work you need to do to really add back what isn't used in capital expenditures in relation to depreciation, knowing the difference between growth and maintenance capex. Those are pretty heavy accounting concepts, and so, but you can learn those. And for me, I took a value investment seminar with Bruce Greenwald myself, and I also have experience in it. I was in business banking, and we did a lot of loan and credit analysis. I was not an underwriter, but I was a banker, and I had to bring deals to the underwriter to approve. And if I didn't know the underwriting standards just as good as the underwriter, I will lose credibility with that underwriter. And so a lot of what they looked at was maintenance and growth capex, what was required, what type of business it was, the growth trends, earnings trends, how long they've been profitable for, what the debt service coverage was. These are similar concepts I use for equity analysis and or even bond analysis, right? And they also dovetail back to my first foray into investments where I did cash flow analysis for real estate, right? So I've been doing that for quite some time, and but Graham and value investing certainly fine-tuned it and made everything that I was doing much clearer in terms of what I was trying to accomplish. Obviously, a business is more than just a simple PE measure. I mean, it could be a low PE stock in a declining industry. So I would say it's not simple. Investing is not simple. Most investors should be invested in an index fund or a diversified portfolio of some sort. I recommend index funds simply because they're low cost, and it almost guarantees you your share of market returns. Nowadays, I think people with ETFs too that mimic index funds get really confused as to how to index properly. And I always recommend the S&P 500 index and contributing regularly to that. If you listen to Warren, He never gives stock ideas, but he does talk about that concept quite often, indexing, right? And also Charlie Munger, right, who was his right hand man, who sadly passed away recently. He was so wise in terms of Charlie Munger, and I learned a lot from him. He'll be missed, that's for sure. But he got Warren away from statistically cheap companies and what they called cigar butts to higher quality companies, paying a little bit more for higher quality companies. Sounds obvious in retrospect, but at the time, given the opportunities, Warren made a lot of money investing in these statistically cheap companies, but he'd have to, obviously sell them when they got to their value. If you listen to him, though, he still adheres to a lot of those principles, value investment principles. There's nothing that replaces, cheap companies. But if it was that easy, some people would just run a screen on really, really cheap companies. But nowadays, if you find a stock trading at half its book value, that's not necessarily a good stock, right? It could be a stock that's going out of business soon, right? And so people have to be careful with simply statistically cheap companies. But there are companies out there with strong cash flows, strong earnings, strong owner earnings, that are growing their earnings, that are in good industries, that have growth prospects, that are trading at cheap valuations. It takes a lot of work, though, to find these companies, and that's what I do on a day-to-day basis. Is I look through a lot of companies to try to find those companies. First of all, good companies, and then second of all, good companies at reasonable prices. And that takes an incredible amount of work. If you find the right one, you can find what people want, most people want, and that is a market beating stock, meaning in relation to the S&P 500, this stock can outperform the S&P 500, which is the general market. Most large money managers and institutional managers don't even beat it's some statistic out there, like 90%, or I think it's 98% of managers don't beat the S&P 500. And working in institutional money management, that's a common thing. But a lot of people say, "Oh, it's because you're diversified into bonds." But no, I mean, it's one of those things where you get to a large enough size, and if the money manager makes money off of, let's just say, assets under management, and they get a percentage whether you're up or down, they get rewarded, right, for gathering more assets, right? I get rewarded for performing well, and so my focus isn't to go out there, sell to a lot of people and get a lot of clients in and things like that. My sole focus is to find good companies at reasonable valuations. And, my barometer is the market, how I do relative to the market. And so it is what I believe most investors should be concerned about. But I found time and time again that investors don't really ask that question, and they have reasons to, still need a money manager, even if they're underperforming. If I said, "Hey, go index," they may not even know how to index. And so a lot of why I'm doing this series and starting this podcast is, again, to help with knowledge. It's a new medium of knowledge. If I say go read The Intelligent Investor, people may not do that, but people will listen to podcasts all day and listen to an audiobook and scroll all day and get bad information doing that. But today I've talked about, obviously, Intelligent Investor. I've talked about Charlie Munger. I've talked about Warren Buffett. These are people I follow. These are people I respect. And these are people, and these are, I recommend others learn from, especially nowadays where you get the meme stocks. You get people posting on forums. You've got a lot of interest spurred by low commissions or no commissions now, fractional shares, where you can buy or break a stock into smaller pieces, right? And so you've got a lot of people out there interested in investing, and what they're actually doing is what Benjamin called speculating, which is, there's a difference between investing and speculating, where speculating, as you can imagine, is what it sounds like. You're kind of guessing at it. You're not doing the proper analysis. You're not looking at earnings over 10 years. You're not comparing the price to, those earnings. You're not tethering a stock to its any type of value whatsoever, right? So nowadays people will come up to me and say something like, "What do you think of like artificial intelligence?" I say, well, what's the valuation on it? Or even how do you value it? Right? What do you look at in terms of a business analysis to determine if you know that or not? Right? How do you know that that's a good value? How do you know that you actually understand that? Let's just say company or industry, right? Nowadays, you can buy ETFs that are supposed to be low cost, sort of very diversified funds or instruments that end up trying to buy an industry, trying to buy a certain macro idea, trying to buy theme, and it becomes almost as difficult as picking individual stocks as picking the right ETF now. And most people understand that ETFs may invest in individual securities, but I don't think people understand like there's so many different types of ETFs. It's gone away from what you can utilize it best for, which is a way to invest, a way to index, a low cost way to index. And I typically recommend the S&P 500 index. Warren, if you follow him, that's what he typically recommends. I would recommend people read Warren's annual letters. There's a lot of interviews that he has had over the years, and I'd recommend people look at those. And again, if you don't have the time and the patience to look through individual securities, and I'm talking about reading the annual reports, reading the quarterly reports, jumping on the quarterly calls, if you don't have the time and inclination to do that, you shouldn't be investing in individual stocks, because it is very difficult to do to invest in the right stock or company. For me to say, hey, invest in this particular company, XYZ company, I'm diversified, right? I have 10, 20 stocks that I'm invested in, let's just say, and I'm giving you one idea that you don't know when to buy it, you don't know when to sell it. It's one of those things where I wouldn't recommend that. If you're just starting your investment journey, or even if you're looking at the markets today and you're like, wow, it's crazy, I really encourage people to don't have a financial advisor, or even if you do, is to index and consistently contribute to that index. Understand that investing is much harder than it looks. It takes a lot more energy than it looks to have market beating returns, and most people can't do it. Most people, even professional money managers, cannot do it, right? But there are some that can. Munger has an interview out, his last interview with the Daily Journal, he said 95% of money managers aren't earning their keep. It's a mind-boggling statistic, meaning he thinks he knows, and I know, 95% of the managers that you go out and have them managing your money will not do better than an index. There's still room for that industry. I worked in it, obviously, especially if you find someone who has no idea about investing, has no background, and they've just got all this money. It is a value add, because they can really, instead of underperforming, they may lose all of it. People like Warren Buffett, people like Charlie Munger, and in their view, if you're not beating the market, what is your value? What is your value add? And so my entire incentive structure is based on doing, and so that's where I spend a lot of my time. That's where I make the most of my money is doing that. So just to give people an understanding of what I do on a day-to-day basis, I get that question a lot. I'll look through stocks. I'll maintain my current securities and portfolio. I'll read annual reports, a lot of annual reports. I'll go through quarterly calls, quarterly earnings. I'll read newspapers, the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, some really good financial publications. And, I typically avoid buzzy ideas, because that typically makes the stock or industry more expensive. And so you have to have discipline and a framework that you can follow day in and day out, so that you don't get caught up in that. I think that's very important to do. Is why, like I said, I have this investment philosophy that has been effective for so long and for so many people, and that I follow. I think in future podcasts I can go into more basics, such as like indexing and things of that nature. And like I said, I'm always happy to share my knowledge, my investment philosophy. I think that could potentially keep people away from the worst of ideas and the worst of our tendencies as investors, right? And if I can help people with that, it's it would be, I think, worth my time. Worth the effort. Now, the other thing I want to talk about, kind of off the side, is Raygun and her performance and what this means for breaking, what this means for the breaking community. The comments breaking shouldn't be included in the future Olympics and things of that nature. My hope is that people have a more informed view of breaking and what it actually entails. And the best way to do that many times is to go out there and try it. Go out there and go to an event. Go out there and feel free to comment. I mean, how many people in your personal network? Not this doesn't count if you're like in a crew or something, in a b-boy crew or b-girl crew. But how many of you in your personal networks know someone who can do windmills, flare to windmill, right? How many can do it themselves? How many have tried it? And so, just to give people background from where I come from, I'm not a hardcore b-boy who has been doing it for 20 years. I did it in high school. I learned. I saw a guy, he was doing flares, and the crowd loved it. I was like, I want to do that. I didn't really find someone who I could learn from until I met a gentleman named Chris Vieira, who I remember him trying out for the basketball team. I was too. But I asked him, I saw him breaking, and I asked him, hey, can you teach me? Basically. And his response was, yeah, happy to. And had I gone out there and had someone who was like, oh, you're terrible. No. Or, oh, your moves look so bad. Stop. I would have stopped. I wouldn't have been encouraged. But here I go with Chris and a few other people, and we'd go after school to my garage, put out some cardboard and practice. Obviously, after he graduated, and so I learned a lot from him. He taught me windmills. He taught me, I guess we called them shuffles. People call them footwork, up rock. He taught me up rock. He was really good at those, and he taught me those as well. And I took that, and after he kind of graduated, didn't really have that peer group and to break with, and at least for me, I didn't know anybody in a crew, but at least I don't remember many crews. I just remember people would dance on their own, and then you learn from that individual. And so I learned from Chris Vieira. I started a break club at my high school. It's called the B-Boy B-Girl Club. Unfortunately, the B-Girl phased out after a while because I couldn't get enough B-Girls to join. And I think that's still the case today. It's really hard to find B-Girls, mainly because I think it is a very male-dominated sport and activity. I remember I was trying to teach windmills to a B-Girl one time, and if you can't pick it up right away, you may get discouraged. So, looking back, I could have done a better job teaching up rock, down rock, or shuffles, because a lot of people find that easier. Up rock, shuffles, those are a lot easier to do than power moves, what they call power moves, windmills, flares, crickets, head spins, which require many times a lot of upper body strength, getting a lot of momentum going. It requires a lot of strength. And it's also scary when you start going. And to do that, especially in front of a crowd, to perform in front of a crowd, it adds an even more scary element to the whole thing. But me as rally coordinator, I would bring in the B-Boy Club, and we had a few breakers, a popper, and we'd perform, and people loved it. Going back to the B-Girl thing, back then, I don't remember seeing that many girls doing power moves, and I was so happy to see B-Girls in the Olympics doing not only power moves, but really difficult power moves, like air flares, like air flare combos. And so this was Raygun's competition. I think Raygun's biggest weakness was that she didn't have power moves. She didn't have windmills. So what you saw her doing, the touching her toes thing on the side, that looked like an attempt at windmills to me. Her kangaroo hop, that was an attempt at trying to be creative for the lack of power moves. And just to give people context, she didn't make it out of the round robin, meaning the first round she didn't even make. And some people may say, well, she shouldn't have been in the Olympics at all. I don't know why that even is a point of discussion. The fact is she was in the Olympics. And, she was out there trying her best, performing her heart out in front of a crowd and going out there round after round. And I personally respect her for that. I respect the fact that she was out there breaking and battling. I think a lot of people wouldn't even do that. I don't know many people who would willingly, join a cipher, break in front of a crowd. I mean, if you look at her smaller battles, she has some moves. I think she performed them better on her own, at times, it seemed like. One, because there were so many rounds in the Olympics that she had to do. Two, you get nervous. It's like what you imagine that you could do in your own living room, all of a sudden, when you're in front of a big, large crowd, it changes. When they start cheering, or when they start booing, perhaps, or when they start getting silent, people may react differently. For me, I fed on that. I enjoyed it. My view is coming from B-Boy Club president, starting a B-Boy Club, teaching others. One of our club members ended up getting on America's Best Dance Crew, and they won it. I taught that particular person their first moves. I didn't get credit for it. They didn't end up saying, hey, I learned from this and this particular person or club or something like that. But that doesn't change the fact that I started an institution, what I felt like was an institution, got the charter ready, found a club advisor in Mr. Hallgren. He provided a classroom after school. I bought tapes with fundraising. I did fundraisers with the help of the B-Boy Club and people even outside the B-Boy Club. That's how much that club was loved. And we were able to buy some VHS tapes and learn more from those. I think it's important for people to, give credit back where credit is due. Wherever they learned their moves, give them credit. Like I learned value investing. Okay. I'm going to say I learned it from Warren. I'm going to say I learned it from Benjamin Graham. I'm not going to say I came up with this novel idea, right, myself. I think I don't know why people would do that. Going back to me starting the B-Boy Club, that's where my entire mentality is in terms of from someone who's taught others, from someone who started a crew that performed, that did well. I had to teach people coming in who were interested. And so from that angle, I think I could describe what went on with Ray Gun a little bit better than most people have been describing it, right? And again, that it goes back to her weakness in terms of power moves, right? And what she tried to do to make up for it. And unfortunately, that's what created all the memes, I think, right? And it didn't hone in on her footwork. It didn't hone in on her head drill. She has one head drill. If you look at the Australian breaking scene, the second place finisher, Molly, she has a flip, 2 windmills to oppose, and then 1 flare. And I don't think that was enough to overcome Ray Gun's footwork, her up rock, and her creativity. And that's the same mentality she brought into the Olympics. But then she went up against much tougher competition. Both of the U.S. competitors didn't even make it out of the round robin, let alone Ray Gun. So I think what people are missing when they keep talking about Ray Gun is how about logistics? How about Sissy? How about Sunny? How about the top 3 finishers, Anami? How about Nika? How about India? How about 671, who was doing air flares and power moves like you wouldn't believe? Nobody's mentioning these things, and they'd rather focus on that, have little clips, believe that they know what they're seeing, and believe that what Reagan was doing deserves no credit because she didn't get any she didn't get any points. It's like investing, so it's a lot harder than it looks. And so I'd encourage people to go out there and try a power move, and then you'll kind of know what Ray Gun's going through when she's trying to make up for the fact that she can't do them. And it's okay to say stuff. I just encourage people to learn a little bit about what they're saying and say it in a more informative manner. Be informed when you're talking about it. When people say, "Oh, it's because of Ray Gun that they cut it," they're saying some really mean things, like you shamed our country and stuff like that. But when they're saying they cut breaking because of Ray Gun, that's not true. It was cut from LA in 2028 before the event happened. And guess where it is in 2032? It's in Brisbane, Australia. So if I was the breaking community, especially, but it's not the you're not getting that flack from the breaking community. But if I was in the breaking community, or people who like breaking purportedly, and are speaking on behalf of it, like ray gun, this and that, you didn't do it right. They should be nice to her if they think she's that connected to all these people. Please connect us to the right people, and get breaking into the 2032 Olympics. you know, so we should be nice to her. And again, I have incredible respect for someone who goes out there and performs. And tries to perform their best. It's just like seeing someone go out in the boxing ring. Obviously, you don't want to see someone, go out there and get knocked out. But if you're going to go out there any amateur level and fight, you get respect from people. And I think people at a minimum should respect the fact that she was out there doing it, and she trained incredibly hard as well. Some people can train all their lives and still not pick up power moves. I know people are in disbelief, but like I said, I encourage people to try it, join it, go to an event. I went to an event this past weekend. Really good breakers, but again, no B girls. It was all guys. That's why I want to encourage girls to break, women to break, and try it, and especially the people out there posting about all this stuff. Try it. It's incredibly difficult to do, to say, mean-spirited things to her. I don't know why she deserved it. Most people didn't even watch it. It's clear they didn't watch it. They watched this little clip. They try to imitate it online or something. They look even worse than she did, right? And that's what they think breaking is in the Olympics were. And I find that very uninformed. And I would just encourage people to, if you can see, watch, which they're up now on Olympics.com, watch some of the sets that the final 8 did, to watch that and kind of see what she was up against and what a lot of good breakers were doing. B-girls doing what a lot of the B-boys were doing. Phil Wizard with his unlimited creativity. Danny Dan, a lot of creativity. U.S. got bronze. And so whatever people say, this doesn't change the fact that it was selected as an Olympic sport in Paris for 2024, and people don't even acknowledge that. And so to say it's gone forever, I don't know. Even baseball took some breaks from the Olympics. Skateboarding just got included. And so you just never know. It's obviously generated a lot of buzz. People are very interested. You should have, there's a lot of great energy around it when I went to the event this past weekend. People are always interested in it. And even when I was in high school, people loved it. I named it B-Boy, B-Girl because I didn't think twice about it. I just thought, I didn't realize how rare a B-Girl was until now, right? In my more experienced years. And so that's why I don't want to discourage girls from going out there and looking foolish. I mean, if I gave up for messing up, I wouldn't have had as much success as I did. And I can guarantee you, a lot of the B-boys and B-girls who have gone out there and tried it themselves, they've messed up, and they've embarrassed themselves, and they had a bad day, or a bad series of sets even, and they got to go back and try to improve and get better. But after my first rally, when I went out there was a lot of kids, a lot of high schoolers out there. The whole school was out there. Each class had about 400 students, probably about 800 students show up out of 1,600. More should have been in there. But all of a sudden, the moves that I was trying to do didn't work as well. I was always practicing without shoes. All of a sudden I had shoes on. It was heavier, so my windmills looked a lot lower than I thought they would. And so if ray gun went from small ciphers, small battles, to all of a sudden she's in a stadium, I mean, you can imagine she might have been rattled. And again, it's not to feel sorry for her or things like that, and she shouldn't feel like a victim either. It's more understanding what she might have been up against, the moves she was attempting, the competition she was up against, and the level of difficulty that she obviously was trying to execute on. I think if people were more informed about those things, they would speak from a more informed mindset, and their posts would be more informed as well. And so I'm not going to sit here and stop the world from posting memes and things of that nature. That's not my point, but it's one of those things where the people who have done breaking have done it for years. It's been around since, obviously the 70s, and it's been around. It's going to keep going, and so you just never know if it'll be included in future Olympics. In the meantime, it's been included as an Olympic sport, and I think the world got a taste of it, and that, I think, should be considered a success. And I think the people who are making fun of Reagan should, in the same breath, acknowledge the success of the event, the fact that this was the first time it was there, and there were medals awarded, and it, in many ways, it's the pinnacle of where breaking could get, and then also acknowledge what she did well and how well the other b-boys and b-girls did, and that would just be a much more informed conversation. And so that's why I wanted to start this podcast, is to help people with certain topics that I may know, or I feel like I know, or have experience in. I hope I've been able to do that. Like I said, I'd encourage people to get out there and try it themselves, go to an event, in terms of breaking and in terms of investing, to realize in both breaking and investing, it's not as easy as it looks, right? To pick individual stocks is extremely difficult, right? I would encourage people to buy an index fund, right? And then as far as breaking, there's more to doing windmills than it looks. People on TV make it look easy, but it's not that easy. And so give it a try. That's what I encourage you to do, and then talk about it then. And if you can't do it, there's no shame in it. You shouldn't feel shame. You should hopefully be around some people who encourage you, right? And by the way, for the people who are there looking at the markets and saying, hey, this particular person, one person is causing a market decline or a market increase, it just shows the lack of understanding of how markets work. A decline in one day, I mean, we've made a lot of that back in the markets, and it shows a weak grasp of markets by saying one person in particular may have caused this decline or this increase or whatever it is. It shows a really poor grasp of how markets work and how business works. It just horribly uninformed. This is why I started this podcast, and I hope to help people on their journey. And if I help a few people, I'd be very happy about that. So if you like what you see, please subscribe, please like, feel free to comment.